difficult, and I think my previous presenter did most of my presentation, so I'm going to keep it very short. I might be able to spend a bit of time from a very different perspective, because I also have a very similar slide on the architecture, and pretty much the journey which we went through is also same, right? How do we have a large application? How do you make it a bit more easy to take forward? But India has got a very, very different problem. China has solved it in a very, very different way. See, India, everything is a scale problem or a population scale problem. So a lot of things which you think will work actually does not work when it goes into production, or it does not scale up. And it is a real challenge, right? Because our test environment sometimes contains 5 to 6 million accounts. That's test. It's not production, right? So what I wanted to just focus is, to see how these digital partnerships are built. What are the real problems? Can I assume that most of the people here are from a technology background? Yeah? So which is very different. Right? Normally I don't speak to technology people that often. So it is quite refreshing. Because it is extremely key for people who are doing technology to understand the larger context of the business. And we are speaking about this for many, many years, right? Business technology and business should work together, people understand. But what has happened over the years I'm seeing is that is going far and far apart. And especially it becomes very, very complicated in a digital kind of environment, because if you see digital products, there is very little distinction between products and technology. So the first thing I would like to say, if you are in technology, if you want to build things at scale, you need to have phenomenal understanding of the product. If you don't have that understanding of the product, it becomes very difficult to build systems, because you could use the greatest technology, but still you will be building a silo. Okay, and that is what we try to avoid. In our context, how do we break the silos? And the product and technology work together. And that's the first thing which I wanted to say, because sometimes we get carried away too much by saying that I'm going to use the greatest authentication, I'm going to use the greatest middleware, I'm going to use the, containerization is, I think, one of the most abused word in the last 10 years. No one exactly knows what's going on, but we have containerized a lot of things. I was talking to someone in Singapore last week. They said that, look, the discussion was, era of microservices is over. It's just fascinating, right? Because everyone thought without microservices you can't do. Now people are saying that it has become so complicated that it is becoming very difficult to orchestrate. So then I asked them, what are you going to do? They said, we have to find another tool to do this. It's because there's absolutely no end to some of the things what we are doing, right? But I think good teams, I think what they make a difference is they bridge the gap between business and technology. They really look at customer holistically, what the customer wants, and build a solution which not only scales, right? It is also accurate. It is available all the time. So these are the most important things today. See, if you go back, we will always say, to make anything 100% available, it becomes very expensive. But we have looked at time and again, actually it is not that expensive to make something 100% available if you have built it, fairly correctly. And these things are real. Huh? As we move on to, we touched a bit upon agentic. I'm sure all of you have been bored to death on agentic and AI. I will also spend some time, because to just ensure that I get some feedback from you to see whether we are on the right path or not, right? So that becomes very, 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 very challenging. Should I have only 2 or 3 slides. I don't think I'm going to let's think about this, right? I think it is again, how many of you are not from India? Quite a few of you. I very strongly urge people to really look at what is happening in the digital public infrastructure space. Okay? I think my thing, if I say it is accidental that it has happened in India, people might not agree to it. But if you need to solve a population scale problem, we cannot build, each corporates cannot build systems. So what is happening there is that how systems are built have a huge impact on how pretty much I would call any DPI as an open ecosystem, right? Because many of the things which you would build as a functionality is actually available outside. You don't need to do it. If you want to do authentication, just go and use your Aadhaar authentication works, right? Today, if you have account aggregators who has the ability to take all your bank statements and give an analysis back to you, right? Actually, I had a video, unfortunately, my laptop has an issue and then it was too big, I don't have it. We have a use case in which, for our top-ups, the only field the customer has to give me is mobile number. It is a single field entry. You just give me that field, within a minute, he gets $500, $600 of loan in his account. That's all it is. There's no more data entry. Because suddenly you've gone into a world in which you thought journeys are the one which is going to create everything, and I'm saying the next 3 years journeys won't exist. You don't need, because digital public infrastructure or open ecosystems are so powerful that by a single field, for me to take the credit decisioning happens straight away. Imagine, so when we do that, I'm going to leave all these things. So let's look at this, right? And I think we will stick to this slide, for the rest of the next, might be 15 minutes, and then you can ask me some questions. So now suddenly what we are realizing is the journeys are gone, right? So that means what is happening is pretty much everything is going to become headless, and it's going to happen. And my theory is, might be your mobile phones also will go off. Because if you go to tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities in India, people can't use all these fancy phones. And a lot of people don't know how to read or write, right? So what's the only thing they know? They can speak. So imagine I just take my phone and say, look, I need a loan of $100. And that's it, right? Today we have got the entire infrastructure built nationwide to facilitate that. Yes, there are certain things which you need to do it in your organization. So that's why if you see this one API management layer and what we call as an ABC platform, which is again a fairly, of course this is also, if you see, broken down to what the previous gentleman spoke, right? It is kind of services, it's kind of, you can use it in different use cases, etc., etc. Suddenly, this layer, where you see the, oops, did I press anything wrong or? Okay, we'll come back to that, right? No, suddenly it becomes a very, very difficult scenario where you don't have anything in the top as a screen, anything in the top as a journey. So today, if you really look at our digital loans, it is pretty much originated in one of the platforms, right? Which is your Paytm or a PhonePe or a Navi or you name it. And for us, the biggest success was when we started this project, they used to dictate what APIs should use. We have done so well now we dictate what APIs we will use. Because that's really the power of how you have run a business very well at scale. Because if there is a partner who's coming and saying, giving an API, we said, sorry, tough luck, my friend, I've got already everything built. This is what it is, because the amount of orchestration which happens in the WSO2 layer is phenomenal. It has the ability to take quite a number of information and do it at speed, at scale, give an output what the consumer wants. And why this is very complicated, because from a consumer point of view, imagine if he's going to enter only one field, he's going to expect an answer in the next 15 seconds, 20 seconds, right? Because he has entered one field. Previously, he used to key in a lot of things. Now, all those things are gone because the entire set of information is going to come from different systems, right? Aadhaar will give me Aadhaar information, PAN card will give me tax information, account aggregator will give me the bank statement information. It's suddenly, and of course, credit, we have your BRE engine, whatever it is there, and then if you go through the payment gateway, the money is disbursed. Now, are we ready for this? Are we really thinking about how to build? Because it is very easy to get caught in the API layer saying that, look, I'm going to connect to a lot of things. I'll give another example. I don't know how many of you, think about how systems will be built in the next 5 years, right? So it's a very famous, or it's a very favorite topic of mine. Around 6 years back, I used to work in a bank in Kuala Lumpur. So the problem which we took was, how do we run a core banking without a core? We said, is it possible? Because if you see all the proprietary systems, whether it's a card system or a core system, it is tied to a particular database. And there is a data structure which is involved, and everything revolves around that. I am sure in the next 5 years that paradigm is going to be broken. And I was talking to RKM yesterday. I said, look, systems will be built very differently, right? So there, what we essentially did, we did it for credit card systems, and you'll realize why this becomes very critical for our thinking. You fill up a form, right? I'm just saying I might need only 3 or 4 fields to really be keyed in, because the rest of the information I can get it from outside. And there our thinking was, once you get it, put it in the data warehouse first. See, if you see in the system development life cycle, we don't do it that way, right? We go through a set of screens, then it goes through our origination system, we get more data, then we see whether it is approved, then it goes to a loan management system or a card system, certain things. And I've done this thing, right? In the olden days, we key in 70 fields. When the account gets set up, there will be 1,200 fields. Okay, all these things are derived or got from everything, right? And then the data goes to the data warehouse. Now you change the problem the other way. And then suddenly what you will realize, if everything needs to go to the data warehouse, the only connectivity I need is the data warehouse and API connectivity. And I don't need to do any logic at all. I can just get all the raw data, and suddenly you have got a database in which all the fields required to process a loan or a card or an account is there, right? So those days we never thought AI will come, agentic AI will come, or AA agents will come. I just realized that those two things are different when I was in the US, right? Otherwise we use the term AA agents and agentic interchangeable. I'm sure many of you know that those two things are different. We called it as rule engines. Then we said, why don't we just run rule engines on top in a parallel way, and then see whether the account is good enough to be given a loan or not. If it is given, do everything and finish it off. So suddenly we realized we were coming into an architecture where there was no core system at all, and everything was simply running on a data warehouse. And we did pilot, and then it was actually working. So by the time I left the job, so I don't think anyone took that forward. So imagine when you do this, this whole architecture itself is gone. Because the only architecture you're going to have here is this, which will say that if you're a Snowflake or a Databricks customer, you're saying that I'm having that entire thing there, and then it is just rule engines on top. Now, suddenly in that world, the API manager would be still there, still because you need to get information from other things, but the whole thing of where logic will be done goes on to a very different place. Are we ready for that? If we need to do that, how all these systems should change, we should start thinking now itself, because it's going to happen 4-5 years down the line. One of the things I encourage people to watch is Salesforce's keynote last year. It's available in YouTube, Mark Benioff. If you really read between the lines, he's saying that within the next 5 years, Salesforce will not be what it is like today, right? Because you don't need to implement a huge CRM, because you use only 30 to 40% functionality of what that large system has. But imagine you put everything in a database, and then whatever 25 years of what any of these application providers have, they open source it, then you start building your own CRM on top of it. These are all going to happen. That's what I'm saying. If you're an architect, if you are, if you're someone who's very passionate about technology and looking at it, start looking at all these things very closely, because the speed at which that whole portion of how applications will be built is changing very rapidly. So some of these things will be reused, absolutely yes. Some of these logics will be there, absolutely yes. But the way in which it will get presented will be very different. Are we ready for that? It is a question which we need to have an answer, because if someone is going to start a business tomorrow, that's what we did in our digital business, right? Because when we started the business, it went on to this architecture. So we never had a problem of I need to migrate something from a legacy architecture to something new, because this whole thing, over a period of time we developed, but roughly, might be 6 to 7 months your base application was ready, up and running. It didn't take much of time for us because we were pretty much coming up from ground zero. So anyone who comes from ground zero, anyone who does not have the legacy path of migration like what we see, they will build systems very differently. And we need to have a view on that, because otherwise what we will do as an enhancement in the next, next 18 to 24 months will not be useful for any of us, right? And then cost is real. See, today, even modern day business people don't understand technology cost. It is a very, very difficult thing to explain to them why certain things cost a certain way, right? And then the expectation is that on an overall basis, you bring down the cost. But what I have seen time and again is if you meet deadlines and if your system does not go down, people are willing to pay for that cost. I was just talking to my colleague who sits there. I said, look, what you need is one mistake. And the business says, the boss, then I don't believe in your system, what you have. Right? So that becomes very, very crucial. So this is another example I give how, so in India, again, this is an ONDC, is another digital public infrastructure. So we were one of the first one to, go on to this platform, where anyone, basically they connect buyers and sellers in a single platform, right? Which is completely outside of your core systems. Fascinating. Since we had the infrastructure of very good API, very good orchestration, it still took 3-4 months because from the ONDC side, they were trying to figure out how the APIs needs to work, right? Because they kind of need to accommodate both sides. But purely from our side, we did that project in might be 8 weeks. Because most of the things already we had in hand, okay? And again, the whole thing of how ecosystems are built, I honestly feel it is coming up only now. Previously, we were fiddling around saying that there are 15 different companies, let's connect them through an API and then we will figure out what will happen. I think the open ecosystems are real and it requires a very, very different kind of way how we are going to think, how we are going to build. And as I said, the whole thing of building on the data warehouse is real. And that's why if you see, I'm sure quite a number of you are, if you follow Databricks and Snowflakes very closely, right? Databricks started as a data lake, but today where they are spending money, they are coming to the database side of things, right? Snowflake started as a database, now they're going towards the data lake side of things because people figured out that you need both, and once you have both, you don't need anything else. And most of your applications are going to be faceless. I think journeys will eventually, corporates might be still have, but the customer journeys, in my view, is gone. Of course, you are still an avid person who buys things from an e-commerce site, you will go through them because you need to still want to see the product. But for financial services, if you're a loan amount, tenor, interest rate are the only 3 fields you are interested. There's nothing else is required. Right? I mean, if you put these 3 things, you can compute an EMI, which is not too complicated, right? That's all it is. So the massive simplification which is going to have on the business side, we need to correspondingly simplify on the technology side, where I feel that we are not doing much there. We are still trying to make it fairly complicated by getting stuck into different jargons and putting things together. I think we should stay away from that. Is something which I would encourage all of you to do. Again, see this what you see on the right side. Okay. For an account, might be the whole thing. All these things happens in roughly around 12 to 15 seconds for an account which comes, right? And today we have the capacity at the same time, say you get around 10,000 accounts, still it can do it at 15 seconds. And these are all, some of the things are fairly very high, very heavy APIs, because that's how the industry works, right? So, but then, it has been engineered in such a way that we will ensure that speed is not sacrificed at any point in time. Accuracy is not sacrificed at any point in time. And whatever it requires to do that, you do it. Of course, cloud helps a lot in terms of scaling up and scaling down. Very difficult to do this on an on-prem infrastructure. But again, private clouds, sometimes if you have clever infrastructure people, you should be able to do it. But these things are real. And I think going forward, how do we use an entire API ecosystem orchestration in a country like India where everything is population scale? And bear in mind, if you really look at the India structure itself, there are only 200 million people in all these things. There are 1.2 billion people who don't have access to any of these things. So even out of the 1.2 billion people, another 300 million people comes to that you need to build something for 500 million people on a daily basis, which is very difficult. But do you have everything from day one to do it? And that's how we spend a lot of time not worrying too much about today. We'll have to do what is required today. But what will happen 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line? So roughly, hopefully it gives you a sense of how we look at things very differently, in terms of business, in terms of volumes, in terms of scaling up, in terms of how the architecture will change, in terms of how fundamentals of technology will change, and how do we get ourselves ready. Today, this infrastructure helps us. And again, congratulations to WSO2 on 20 years. It's not easy to run any company for 20 years at that scale, but what I'm looking for is, as we move on to these new paradigms, how can you support us, how can you help us, so that we do all these things in a much better way.